mentioned earlier around user-centric research, so actually embedding yourself in those areas, looking and observing, having informal discussions and so forth. And then we've done sort of a more formalized approach with Altai Consulting, which Rudolf detailed earlier. A lot of learnings around all of those, and I think sometimes that's the most valuable thing that can come out of our program, actually, is all the learnings. But if I had to highlight two things, one is that those types of activity are very expensive endeavors. So when you are going to do them, it's probably worth doing them on products that are already proven to have some level of quality for the end user. So a learning for me would be upfront optimization. So some things Julia mentioned, some of that A/B testing upfront, a bit more of an agile approach to product improvement early on. And then, starting your M&E a little bit later on when you know that your product is already, you already have engaged users that are actively using the product. And then I think the other challenge is largely around demonstrating the contribution of mobile to knowledge improvement and behavior change. So it's all fair and well doing a monitoring evaluation like a baseline endline, but actually, like, how do you show that it was mobile that made the change? Because ultimately, this is what we're trying to demonstrate. And I would say, though, that two learnings I can share on, and I'll come back to another point that I think is quite important. Two learnings I can share is that we have seen that when we did a baseline endline approach in a country where our initial model did work, so we had the baseline, we had some beautiful optimization of the product, and then we had the endline, and we noticed that actually results on knowledge retention and reported behaviors were in excess of 15% better across many areas of key nutrition practices and knowledge. And then also, as users are engaging with the product over a longer period of time, we're seeing better levels of knowledge recollection and self-reported implementation of appropriate behaviors. So, we have some early insights that are coming out of there. I think the important thing is that for us, all of these various forms of data analytics with data that's there and data that we're collecting should never be done in isolation, because there's too many gaps. So I think ultimately a lot of the data analytics stuff, you get a lot of questions around why. Do you then go speak to your users and you learn a lot more? One of the things we realized from the M&E is potentially how we have, we had 800 surveys at our baseline, 800 users at our baseline, 800 users at endline, and we have their responses to questions around various nutrition practices. We can now actually back check that, because we know what those users, those participants have actually accessed in terms of content on our service, because we've got our user logs. So I would say that probably that's going to be our best approach in actually demonstrating the value of mobile in making that change. And so, I think the lesson there is just not to do any of it in isolation, but that all of it to some degree is important. And so actually our biggest push of our partners is, use what you've got, use your data, and then talk to your users in any way that you can manage. And so a large amount of our capacity building with our partners specifically is around that. So leave it there. If there's any questions around any of that, you're welcome to.
Super, thank you very much. Take 3 questions. Yes, gentleman in the centre there, and us and the lady there.
So I'm from the Power Nutrition, and so our programs tend to be a minimum of 3 years up to 6 years. And evaluation of the impact of those programs on nutrition status is key to us. And a question I can't get answered by any of the smart people in the world so far is, what's the minimum amount of time you need to show between an intervention, especially behavior change intervention, and stunting outcome? So I hope there's some smart people who can give me that answer. I raise it because when you said it's a two-year evaluation, I wonder if there's some other intermediary outcomes that you're focusing on that are related to behavior change.
That's a good question.
May I just add to what Kim was saying, that we do collect a lot of data that's coming from research, from various work, from analytics on the data logs and so on. This data is used for M&E work, but at the same time, there is a continuous product iteration cycle that we run on the engagement side with the MNO and with our own team, the GSMA team, and we use this data and we backfeed into the surveys, into the products, And we make iterations to the service as we go along from one cycle to the next, which usually lasts about 3 months. Well, it's now over because the program is kind of finishing, but we use a lot of this data, and we actually, data never lies. So as long as you actually know how to interpret the data and kind of fit back into the development of the service, then you're going to end up most certainly with something much more meaningful than what you had at the very beginning.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Rose from World Vision. When you have a long project and a lot of context would change that affects behavior adoption, what would you say, and maybe you're looking at Inca, and the other colleague, what would you say about the midterm? You've got your baseline at the beginning and then an end line. What should you be doing in the midterm to understand the changes that have happened there? Yeah, because I'm thinking if you're waiting to the end and you get things that you cannot quite explain what happened, I think it's likely to miss a point of changes that happen to the context or people's perception of things or norms that were actually missed out. Yeah,
Okay.
for the meantime.
Thank you. Okay, Simon.
Hi. Question is how people think through the ethics of charging consumers who have very little money. In our case, we work with adolescent girls, so we're trying to think that through. Creating incentives for mobile operators is clearly pretty key to scale. I'm just interested as to how other people in the space are approaching that question.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. Okay, Kyla. Yeah.
This is more an observation, but if someone wants to share their thoughts from the panel, I would appreciate it too. I think a lot of the mNE focus that was presented, and I think my experience throughout the project too, has been on service metrics, on how long users stayed on the call, on how long onto like helping services improve, which is important because if there aren't users on the service, of course the content is meaningless. But I want to have a reasonable understanding or insight into what will we really be able to know about nutrition behaviors at the end of this. This is a mobile project. Of course, it's framed in the mobile context, but it almost seems like the impact story will be more about use of mobile writ large rather than is behavior change using a mobile in nutrition. Like there's so many lessons unpacked. What should we reasonably expect? We can see from maybe the mNE data, maybe Kim can share.
Okay, last one from Lawrence, and then we're going to have to take it to the floor.
Thanks. It's not really a question. It's just an observation that we've talked a lot in the last few hours about optimizing awareness, reach, use, repeat use, and you've all told us quite compelling stories about how you use data in real time. You kind of routinize the data collection as part of the process. And it just struck me when you were presenting the impact stuff how complicated it is to optimize nutrition outcome as a goal. And I just don't know how we're going to. I mean, it's been a massive effort, and even at the end of it, you're still not quite sure whether you'll be able to isolate the impact.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering. It must be worth it, but there must be as you go along. Have you got any ideas about shortcuts in the future? Or is this just something you do every 5 years, every 10 years to demonstrate impact, and then you don't do it very often? I wonder if you have any reflections on that.
Okay, so first question on length of time it takes. Well, what we set for the impact evaluation of mNutrition was 2 years, basically because we used this to calculate the sample size for the quantitative sample. But I'm not sure whether 2 years is enough based on other impact evaluations I have done where we didn't find any impact on stunting prevalence. But what I think is more important, at least for me, is that if we want to assess the impact of a behavior change intervention, we should really look at behavior change. and not the outcome which comes much further along the causal line. Because behavior might have changed, or people might have were trying to change their behavior, but then there are so many other factors. If people eat more healthy, choose better complementary food, but water and sanitation is poor, the children have diarrhea all the time, the nutritional status won't have changed, but still the behavior has changed. So I think the focus should be much more on trying to assess behavior better than trying to look at something which comes much further away. The nutritional status, but in mNutrition we chose 2 years.
Can I just add a quick question to that? A quick addition. If it's a brilliant program, intervention that's ticking all the boxes and all the things that need to be done to improve, reduce stunting rates, then I think you could do it within an 18-month exposure period. But those programs don't exist. In the real world, it probably takes 3 years of exposure to get some kind of stunting reduction impact. Most funders are not that patient.
Yeah.
Sorry, within sort of, I think the question was posed really from the nutritional intervention point of view. But in the context of the mNutrition project, you're also talking about the MNOs, the mobile providers and technology providers that are doing it. Well, 3 years, I mean, you ask them what they're going to do in 3 months in that afternoon. So, okay, we've been talking about if you've got the right program, you could go over 3 years. But if you're delivering over a technology platform, and especially if you're releasing autonomy to a private sector partner, they will change that. It's already changing. I mean, the product, I said, the product we're looking at now is quite different to the product we looked at in the inception phase. We know that negotiations are ongoing to reintroduce, to modify the product within the next few months. It's a continually changing process. And once you've got that, you can't even, your intervention's no longer to change over a 3-year period.
Doesn't that point to the limitation of the evaluation methodology? Because that is real work. The fact is that if I'm a marketer of food products, if I get reactions from the market that people don't like taste or the serving size is wrong, I'm going to change it. I'm not going to wait for. Yeah. So I think what I heard from your presentation particularly was a fundamental limitation of the evaluation methodology. I think this pre-post and all this sort of stuff, which is trying to get attribution, not actually measurement of whether things happen or not. It's easy to measure whether something happened or not. I think the challenge you're finding is attribution. And in a dynamic environment like this, which is going to be reality, attribution is impossible, very often.
Well, I think
and isolating it down to 1 or 2 factors.
Yeah, I think that also comes down, taking a step further back, is the expectation of what you can measure. If that expectation is you need to find this, and you need 3 years you're going to have 3 years to do it, and then there's the reality of how it works in the real world. There's a real mismatch of understanding what can be done and meeting everybody's expectations. They need to be set properly from the outset so that you avoid that.
Just to add to Ashish, I think the RCT, randomized control trial, it's hard to control.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying
Okay.
And you don't have a theory of change, which is working, frankly. That is the problem. The theory of change is invalid, so measuring it is sort of pointless in some ways.
Okay, the second question on the data never lies. You can respond to data never lies.
Data never lies. I'm not sure about it because I think we make the decision what data we collect, and data never speaks by itself. Data always needs to be contextualized, needs to be interpreted. So I'm not sure whether we can just rely on data. I think data will speak by itself. So it's a danger to change the product just based on quantitative data.
No, I mean, as we discussed, and I think Kim's point is very valid, is you may be a strong advocate on data analytics, you still need to give the mic to the people or do some ethnographics to really understand what's behind your data points. There's no...
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
I think if I can comment to so a little bit on methodology as well, because we obviously started with the idea of doing the baseline inline approach with some beautiful optimization happening in between. We have a slightly different model to the agri team in that we don't have a grant mechanism, so we rely on good faith of our partners to actually implement our recommendations. doesn't always happen. And so I think what we did now with some of our later evaluation studies is we took more of a controlled approach, where we obviously looked at non-users of the product and users. Obviously, it's hard to compare apples with apples there, so we won't even go into that conversation. But I think coming back to my earlier point about using data as a supplement for the survey, so user logs as a supplement for survey collected data. So if we take one of our countries for an example, where we did the baseline and endline approach, and we had optimization happening in the middle. The baseline, we have 800 participants, and we know exactly what their answers were to each of the nutrition questions that were asked. And we then go and have a look at what content they accessed. So essentially, within that sample, we can get a control group because we can know which of those users should have answered that question correctly based on what nutrition content they had. So we've got a bit of a merge there between your very academic baseline, endline, and actually a bit more of a practical approach to assessing that contribution or attribution of mobile content. And so I think, and I must say, just credit to Altai having to be quite agile in their approach to how they do this. It's not, you've mentioned the nature of mobile always changing. It's tough to just stick with one methodology and just carry it out from start to finish. So it is important to have some backups. And part of my learnings is also plan for the worst and actually design for it. Yeah, I think that's one thing. So that I'm going to comment on the next question, which was from Kyla, around what are the learnings we can get around actual nutrition outcomes. So obviously we can, through this methodology that I just explained now, we can try and show the contribution of mobile to nutrition outcomes. But one of the other works that Altai are doing is more around the qualitative side, is focus group discussions and better understanding the barriers. And obviously that within context of the product that's available to those users. So we look at we have focus groups with users and non-users, and we try and understand, their differences and barriers and enablers. So there's going to be some learnings around that. And I think the most important thing though is actually, it's trying to figure out what was it about this mobile product and the enabling environment that worked or it didn't work, and that's really hard because there's so many influencing factors in each of these different markets. But what we are seeing now, because we're slowly bringing our program to an end across all the markets, is that there are sort of some key learnings that are the same across all the markets. And hopefully you will be able to document those. I don't know, I can't say right now. But there are definitely trends in common barriers, common enablers, and then I guess certain contextual factors that are really essential in understanding how these things work in driving outcome or changes. So one of the things I mentioned is, or maybe I didn't, Tanzania is a great market for SMS because, funny enough, like the SMS usage in Tanzania is surprisingly high. In Uganda, people don't read SMSs. We've seen that through our surveys, apart from the fact that the survey participation rate is really, really low. Only like 6% participated of 6,500 calls that were made, but many of those users don't actually read their messages. So, what do you say in terms of nutrition outcomes on an SMS type service? Actually, the most important learning is maybe SMS not the best platform name. So it's going to be contextual, but there are going to be some learnings across all the 8 markets, which we hope to be able to highlight in our lessons learned publication. I hope.
Which is interesting on Uganda because they're very much a WhatsApp country. So it's not a literacy barrier or a written communication barrier. They just, it's the medium.
It's got to do with the spam thing that you was mentioning earlier.
Yeah. Okay, I'm so sorry, we're going to have to call it quits there. We're running a bit behind, but please do keep up the conversations over lunch. So, firstly, thank you very much from our speakers and panelists. And then I'm going to invite Charlie Sword up just for some closing remarks, and then we'll break for lunch, I promise.
Thanks very much. So I'm standing between you and them. So I'm Charlie Saul. I work with BMJ, which has been best known for many years as the British Medical Journal, one of the world's premier general medical journals. But in recent years, it's been focused much more in how to get the latest academic knowledge out of the heads of academics and academic papers and into the hands of practitioners at the front line. So very much looking at this question of how do you actually affect what happens at that interaction between the patient and the clinician. So this has been of enormous interest to us. I guess what I'm going to attempt to do is summarize some of the themes that have come out. I'm not going to have some magic solution. It's quite clear there are a number of complexities here, but I thought I'd just try and attempt to pull some of those strands together. So I think one of the things that's come out loud and clear is the need at all times to think about some of the languages that are used by the different universes involved here. So we've got there's the donor community, the NGO community, who are used to perhaps operating in very, very long time frames, versus a commercial community who are used to talking with marketing language in terms of audience and engagement and following audiences. And those two have very similar needs in terms of influencing behaviors, changing behaviors, and tracking those behaviors. There are some very similar needs there, but also there are very big operational differences. Commercial organizations can focus on specific audiences that they want to go after. NGOs and people operating in public health and agriculture have to deal with what's the challenges they're confronted with. So there's some real issues there. But I think there's common threads around understanding getting real insights into actual behaviors and not being distracted perhaps by reported behaviors. And there's some challenges there between getting that sort of hyper-localized insights that you might need to bring about some of those changes and operating at scale. And again, a lot of the marketing learnings come from mature Western economies where there is much more homogeneity amongst your audiences, whereas some developing countries, there are huge cultural variations within what you would call a country. So it's not, you can't always say, look at a marketing model from the UK and how do we translate that to the UK. There are nonetheless some of the basic principles that could be explored. One of the factors there in terms of looking at user insights and how you employ that at scale that didn't come up so much as budget. Some of these, the size of marketing budgets for commercial organizations are vast. And if you look at some of the programs in the UK, so there used to be this sinister organization in the UK called the Centre of Information, which is the marketing arm of the government. And when I used to work in mobile advertising, the UK government was the second largest spender on digital media behind P&G. They had a very, very large budget that they could mobilize on those insights, on generating creative to target those particular audiences, those particular environments, and then buying the media to reach them. So there is a lot to be learned there, but recognition that it does require budget to achieve some of those things. I think another topic that came up, which I thought was really interesting, was around who should we be targeting. I think a number of themes around innovators, early adopters, who may be easier to reach, easier to influence their behavior change, particularly if we're looking at new technologies like mobile. But does that mean we then leave others behind? I think for me, this picks up some of the themes around not considering mobile in isolation. Mobile exists as part of a much wider set of influences over individuals' behaviours, how they entertain themselves, and how they learn. So I think thinking very much about how mobile fits within that broader category. And maybe we should think about really where does mobile have the biggest punch? If it packs the biggest punch on those earlier adopters in terms of its ability to engage and entertain and a number of the successes that everyone mobile was talking about, you can still reach big scale there. But are you reaching some of the people in the rural communities? And are there other techniques there? Should we be looking more at radio should we be looking at more of those sort of nodal points, whether they be input suppliers, whether they be community health workers or extension workers? And could mobile play more of an effective role reaching those sort of nodal influencing points and empowering them to do a better job of getting that sort of hyper-localization achieved at those levels? Having a quick flick through so I don't forget anything. Apologies if I leave anything key out, but I think that the idea of thinking about the strengths and following audiences. If you look at what marketers do in the real world, they follow audiences. They lag. They're still spending tons of money on TV when everyone's shifted to digital, but they do catch up. They do try and follow those audiences. So again, think of where the audiences are and how best to reach them. What media is most effective for reaching them is key, while ensuring that you do have mechanisms to capture those that would otherwise be left behind. And I think that theme of mobile not operating in a vacuum really comes down when we think of the evaluation. Clearly, there are lots of whizzy things you can do, as Altai showed. There's some really impressive metrics you can generate, but does that actually show you what impact it's having? And again, if you look in the commercial world, it's great looking at click-through rates on Google, but you still need to do long-term studies over your brand and look at how all those different interactions contribute to how the public feels about your brand. And certainly the work that IDS is doing is looking at those sort of multimodal evaluations. So just using mobile on its own can't really give you all the insights you need. And I think it fundamentally comes back to that challenge of, while working with a commercial world that constantly iterates, can pick and choose which markets they're going to go after with which products. They can change rapidly, iterate. That doesn't always sit well with a donor community, a public health community or agricultural community where progress has traditionally been measured over a very long period of time. And it feels as though some of the potential there is picking up on your point in the end. Yes, if you can build on the research that's been done extensively over a period of time to know that if you can influence this particular pet behaviour, that will ultimately lead to a particular outcome, then maybe the two worlds can come closer together on identifying what those triggers are and not worrying so much about what happens after the trigger, as long as you get to that trigger in the first place. And that might allow for a more sort of creative, fluid, adaptive approach to how you influence those triggers. But I don't think we have all of those answers to get today. But I think what's really encouraging is these conversations are definitely taking place. The donors are looking much more at results-based financing, looking at incentivizing particular behaviors and outcomes in the knowledge that they will then lead to improved outcomes. So there is a much bigger flow of money into those kinds of modes that are more familiar to mobile operators, that are more familiar to people working in perhaps more creative ways with those communities. So I think that's a real sign of hope. And I very much hope that what we've been doing under the mNutrition programme, and thank you to Lawrence for hosting us today, and to the GAIN team, to all the partners in the mNutrition programme, and to all our wider audience, and particularly to those who've been contributing who haven't had direct involvement in the mNutrition. Thank you so much, and I do hope that we can sort of pull together the experiences we've had and inform the debate in future. So thank you.
Super. So I'll literally take 5 more seconds of your time. At the back we have some little brochures and briefs put together by the content team of the mNutrition Initiative, so please feel free to have a look, take them away. We have, I think, all of your email addresses. If we don't, we will get hold of it over lunchtime. What we intend to do with this, the group who's taken part today, is to keep this going, keep the conversation alive, and create some kind of community of practice so that we can take this further. It's been very insightful, very engaging. I've been really happy with the way that it's
There will be a WhatsApp group.
There'll be a WhatsApp group, yeah. So thank you very much, and please keep it going over lunchtime.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte.
Wow.